Hello and welcome everybody back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. I am so excited today because we are going to be breaking down my favorite card from the new Fallout Universes Beyond expansion to Commander, to Magic the Gathering period. The Master Transcendent is going to be the focus of our build today, and I straight up think this is the most powerful commander from Fallout by far. I mean, this is actually one I'm super geeked on. And it actually kind of holds a personal place in my heart. So let's talk about this card, and I'll talk about why I'm so freaking excited about it right now, okay? Thank you to everybody who came up to me at MagicCon Chicago. One of the reasons I took a little bit of a break between the last two videos was I went from moving, so completely moved my house to then going to MagicCon Chicago 3 days later. So that was why there was no video release last week. Thank you all for the patience for that, but also thank you so much for everyone who came up to Chicago. There were so many amazing people who came up and said hi, who said just amazing things like I'm the reason they got into cEDH and that they loved the channel and stuff like that, or that it helped them get into the format. And genuinely, interactions like that make this all worth it. So thank you to everyone who showed up and said those wonderful things. Each and every one of you really helped to make my day, and I hope you all enjoyed the Learn cEDH event that went so smoothly. Thank you all so much. While you're here, do the usual stuff. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you want to show support to the video. Literally, those things are such small actions and they're free and they help out the channel a ton. So if you really like cEDH content like this, make sure to those like and subscribe buttons. And if you're feeling generous and you want to be one of those amazing people over at patreon.com/comedianmtg, any support over there is a giant help. We also are lucky enough to have a couple sponsors for this video today, which makes me very happy because they're both sponsors that I really enjoy. And that's such an awesome thing to be able to have as a creator, is just sponsors you actually believe in. That's super sick. But if you're interested in helping out the channel, patreon.com/comedianmtg helps a ton. We have coaching tiers over on the Patreon, as well as normal tiers just to support the channel and get a few perks like your name in the description after this video. So I'm happy and actually super ecstatic to talk about one of our sponsors for today. We're talking about the Massive Verse fighting card game, which is one of the newest expansions for the Pocket Paragons game. So for those who know me personally, this is basically like my second favorite game to play outside of Magic, and it's so much fun. Basically, Pocket Paragons is what happens if the concept of Commander meets rock, paper, scissors, shoot, and like the mind games of both are combined, right? Pocket Paragons is such an insanely fun fighting system and a super quick to play game. Like most games are like 45 seconds to 2 minutes, which means that sometimes you can get an entire match done in like 10-15 minutes. It's a ton of fun, and right now they have a Kickstarter for their Massive Verse set, which can be played as it's a standalone game, but also can be combined with the previous Pocket Paragon set. And the best part about this system is that, like, if you want to buy a set, you basically get 8 of these entire things, which can give you hours of entertainment and hours of fun. The Massive Verse expansion right now is super cheap. You can go and support it over on Kickstarter. They've already hit their goal, which means that it is going to be made. The set is happening, and you can go and join the Kickstarter right now and get this newest expansion for really not that much money. I mean, like it is pretty affordable. It's $19 for supporting it on the base set level. So right now you can go and get the base game for $19, which is an insanely good deal. The game is a ton of fun. You also can get the team up expansion, which is also available at a higher tier as well. It's so much amazing gameplay compacted into such a simplified design. And once again, you can go grab that. The Kickstarter is going to be live right now. The comments will have the link as well as the description of this video. Let's talk about this deck. The Master Transcendent is our commander for today. It says, for 1 Insulti, so that's our commander's color identity, it's a it is a legendary artifact creature. And when it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters. Now we'll talk about rad counters in a second, but you can put target creature for tap it. Put target creature card in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control. It is a green mutant with base power and toughness 3/3, also 2/4. Okay, let's talk about this card. First of all, legendary artifact creature. relevant for certain cards. Big ones being a few cards specifically, but like one of the things I like to see with a card like this is that you can always like transmute artifact it into a Bolsa Citadel, right? So for blue, and 2 generic mana, you can turn your commander into a Bolsa Citadel. Cool, not why we're talking about this card today, but that is a synergy that we can use in our brewing process with this deck. The big thing is that this is an infinite cast outlet, right? So if I'm doing combos like Food Chain, which works very well in these colors, like very well in Sultai, and Hullbreaker Horror combos, right? Being able to bounce your rocks infinitely and then bouncing your commander infinitely. This is an outlet for both of those combos, right? Because what happens is you give your opponents infinite rad counters. Now let's read those rad counters. What's the way to do that is a great question. Thank you so much for asking. So a rad counter, and this is for each one of these, it does this effect. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, so your first main phase, if you have any rad counters, mill that many cards. For each non-land card, milled this way, you lose 1 life and another rad counter. So if you give your opponent infinite rad counters, what it does is you say, all right, cool, at the beginning of pre-combat main phase, mill 1,000 cards, right? And for every non-land card, so everything that isn't a land, your opponents are losing 1 life. So they mill their entire deck and then they take X damage, where X damage is how many non-lands are left in their library. And for the majority of cEDH decks, that will kill them. I mean, for all cEDH decks, that will kill them, except for in very specific scenarios. But in those very specific scenarios, they still won't have a library. So then they will go to their upkeep and deck themselves, right? So that is the idea with radiation counters. The basically consensus is you infinitely radiation counter somebody, you pass their turn, they go to the main phase, boop, they lose all their life and they flip all their cards. So that being said, infinite rad counters wins the game. Okay, then we have this other ability, which this card did not need. It did not need to have a really cool, sick other ability, but it does, and this ability freaking slaps. Okay, so put target creature in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control. So on a very base level, you can just boom, hit your opponents with some rad counters. On their upkeep, they start milling a bunch of things. Or sorry, on the pre-combat main phase, start milling a bunch of stuff, and you're like, oh, sick, you just milled over a dockside. Tap my commander, 3/3 dockside, uncounterable, no casting cost, nothing. Boom, copy it on the battlefield right away. Instant speed. This is not a sorcery speed restriction. Anytime this thing can be activated, right? For those who don't know the history of myself as a player, as many of you do not, one of the first primers I ever made in cEDH was when Kazur and Okima, the Sultai food chain deck of the time, came out. And the reason it was special was because you could use Consultation and Tainted Pact super aggressively, and it didn't matter what was left in your library because they were the outlet. The same thing works with the Master Transcendent, right? Even if Food Chain is the last card in your deck and you exile every other card in your library, right? You can still, on your turn, then proceed to play Food Chain and infinitely cast the Master and pass to your opponents, who will then die, right? So this is the aggro, or aggressive, I shouldn't say aggro, but this is the aggressive Consultation deck we've always wanted with so much more upside. I'm gonna build it with y'all and we're gonna make it happen, okay? Starting things off, I'm gonna throw in my cEDH, fast mana package, right? So for me, that is, a couple of these cards here. So we got things like Chromox, the Jewel Lotus, which I don't know, this is a Jewel Lotus deck. We'll sideboard that one. All right, so we got our fast mana basics here. We got our Chromox, Lotus Petal, Mana Crypt, Mox Diamond, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, right? These are sort of the basics we start with. We can add more as we go throughout the process, right? We're probably gonna end up on a Signet or two, maybe a Mox Opal, stuff like that. But we got our basics in there, right? Now, the other thing I like to add right away is just let's get our lands as a rough shape, right? So let's say I assume this deck is going to play at maximum 29 lands, right? So I'll put 29 islands in there just to say, hey, fill in the blanks for now. And we got to thank one of our sponsors from today, Tales of Adventure Magic. For those who don't know, Toa is one of the big names in Magic vending, period. They have a ton of selection in stock. They have every single revised dual land and a ton of things that cEDH players need. They also have free tracking on their shipping, UPS next day delivery. They've had over 1 million orders shipped worldwide, and you can also see them at a ton of different Magic events. So if you check in the link down below, and if you use code comedian, you can actually get 5% off of your order, which is pretty sick. So thank you, Toa, for the sponsorship, and hope you all check out their sales because they're a super solid store and one of the first places that I go to during real life conventions too. Then with our lands in there, let's talk about the win cons we just went over, right? So I did say this is a food chain deck, right? We're trying to win the game with food chain. We are also, we need the enablers for food chain. Now, I'm going to be playing both of the exile cards for food chain. The reason behind this is because we want both of these things to increase the likelihood that if on the end step I cast a Tainted Pact or a Demonic Consultation, I want to have a high likelihood of hitting one of my exile creatures before I hit my food chain. Because the whole point of Mist Hollow Griffin and Eternal Scourge is you need them in exile or in your hand when you have food chain so that you can cast them infinitely with food chain, right? So the higher likelihood that at the end step, if I have no other cards in hand, I go Demonic Consultation naming food chain, right? I want to have a high likelihood that in the process of me exiling a bunch of cards before I hit food chain, I want to hopefully hit a Mist Hollow Griffin or an Eternal Scourge, which is why I'm playing both, because I want to double that likelihood, right? If there's only one in there, right, it is decreasing the likelihood that that will happen, that I will hit the hit I need to, right? Moving on, we talked about win condition number 2, right? We need Demonic Consultation, right? As we just talked about. And, probably going to be playing this in these colors, Tainted Pact as well, right? Because we are comboing these with the ever so classic Thassa's Oracle, right? Which we will then be throwing into the deck too. Do forgive me if the computer's a little slow today. It is riding the struggle bus in the new apartment. Hence one of the delays between this week and last week's video. One of the other things I'm thinking of, right, is if we are talking about, oh, hey, we're trying to focus on this ability to mill my entire library and win the game that way, I might also want another way to do that, right? If this win con is so clean as we think it is, I kind of like the idea of using Lightning Greaves, which classic commander staple, maybe more in the casual sense, right? At that point, Cephalid Illusionist has the ability that when it is targeted by something, right, you mill the top 3 cards of your library. So an equip ability is targeting. So what will happen is, as long as you have another creature, you can go, okay, cool, I'm going to move the Lightning Greaves onto Cephalid Illusionist. That triggers Illusionist's ability to mill for 3. Okay, Lightning Greaves goes on Illusionist. I'm going to move the Lightning Greaves to another creature. I'm going to move the Lightning Greaves back to Cephalid Illusionist. Illusionist gets targeted, mills 3, right? So once again, you can do this thing where you move the Greaves back and forth and then suddenly go, okay, cool, now I move it over to my commander, tap, bring back the Oracle, win the game. Super clean, super easy. I love it. Another one of the win cons we talked about earlier is Hullbreaker Horror, right? We are not going to leave home without Hullbreaker Horror. It is very, very strong and really solid as a late game engine, right? It's so good at being able to be like, oh no, that rule of law is stopping me winning the game. Cool. End step flash in Hullbreaker Horror. The first mana rock I play on this turn is going to come in and it's going to bounce your rule of law effect. Cool. Now I'll play another mana rock and then make infinite mana, play my commander over and over again. Pass the turn, you have radiation, die, right? That part, sick, easy, clean, ends the game. All right, so that is that. And those are the main win cons we're looking for in this deck. One of the things you got to always be thinking about too when you start playing some of these exile cards like Eternal Scourge and Mist Hollow Griffin is Necropotence is really good with these cards, right? Because Necropotence means that you can play Necro and be like, yeah, I'm going to jam like 20 life into Necropotence, draw a bunch of cards, throw a bunch of cards into exile. Oh, one of the cards I threw in exile happens to be this Mist Hollow Griffin. And one of the cards I got 20 cards deep into Necropotence, turns out that was my food chain, right? I do think that it really helps to, if we're going on this, to open up Born Upon a Wind as a way to win off of Necropotence at that instant speed before you go to your cleanup step, right? Just a really nice way to flash in your win cons, right? So, move to your end step, flash in Born Upon a Wind, boom, all my stuff is flash. My food chain that's in my hand now, great, it's in play, make infinite mana, cast my commander infinitely, pass turn to you. How's those radiation counters? Die, right? So you basically, the biggest downside about going infinite rad counters is you do lose to your opponent going on my upkeep or on my draw step. I'm going to cast my Born Upon the Wind, right? That part does suck. On the other hand, it happens at the beginning of their post or pre-combat main phase. So, they don't really have a lot of time on their turn and they never have a time to do stuff at sorcery speed on their turn. So whatever they have to have that keeps them alive has to be an instant. And also even if they Angel's Grace or something like that, you can then pass the turn to them and then they just die again, right? So like at the end of the day, it still works plenty fine, right? Okay, so we've already got 49 cards in this deck. I think it helps at this point to say, let's tackle the tutors, right? Because we want our game plan to work, right? So we want our Imperial Seal, right? Our classic top deck tutor. We want a Vampiric tutor as well. We want a Demonic tutor. And I'm gonna add Diabolic Intent, but I'm actually gonna move that over to the sideboard because I don't know if this is gonna be one of those decks. Same thing with Beseech the Mirror. I think it's a really good card. I just don't know if it's going to, I don't know how to spell mirror apparently. That's awkward. I don't know if it's going to end up in the final iteration of this deck, so we'll move to the considering board right now. Some of the things we want to be tutoring are things like Mystical Tutor, right? So, because we talked about how Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact are basically one card win conditions, so we want to be tutoring for those for sure. Tutoring for a tutor is always awkward, but when one tutor basically assembles your entire win, not much to scoff at, you know? We did talk about how we have a bunch of creature win cons as well, so Worldly Tutor feels pretty appropriate here as well. And then I also don't want to ignore the fact that we do need to play Interaction as a cEDH deck. So let's get some of those interaction staples for me. So like things like Swan Song are definitely up there. I have been not leaving home without Spell Snare as of late, which I know might be a hot take to some people, but this card has won me so many games and saved my life in so many games. I'm all about Spell Snare. I've been on the Mistcast kick over Dispel lately. I also always play an Offer You Can't Refuse. I love our Force of Will, obviously. Force of Will. I love the Force of Negation, our Flusterstorm, our Mind Break Trap, and Mental Misstep, my least favorite of these that I always forget. All right, so it's a pretty good counterspell package I can definitely get behind. All right. I think that's all the classic ones that I normally pick for a deck. You know, there are definitely other ones that we can slot in as time goes on with the list, but those are the ones that are interesting. I guess it's also worth noting that, like, I didn't really talk about this when I was breaking down the cool stuff you can do with this commander. You can also put in a decent amount of self-mill stuff for this deck that allows you to play like a Reanimator game plan, right? Like there's a world where, for example, looking at something like Hullbreaker Horror in the deck, right? I can play Master Transcendent, give myself the rad counters, right? And hope that I flip into something like a Hullbreaker, so then I can use the Master's ability to just basically put it onto the battlefield, right? That is a very valid way of doing things too, right? So that is something to keep in mind if you're looking at this deck. Doesn't mean it needs to explicitly work like that, but that's one ability that you can sort of rely upon too, if you want to play this deck a little bit differently than we have it currently. One of the best cards to enable this sort of strategy we're going for here is the brand new, and I guess it's not even brand new at this part, but like Tyvar, Jubilant Brawler, right? Gives our commander haste, gives our hermit druid haste, allows to untap certain dorks and stuff like that. It's like the perfect hermit druid card that also happens to work really well with our commander for basically all the same reasons except for Cephalid combos that Lightning Greaves does. So yeah, I'm all about Tyvar in this deck. Let's not forget while we're here to take our vegetables here, get our Ristic Studies, let's get our Mystic Remoras, right? Of course, these are our cEDH staples that we know and love and appreciate. We want to also get some of our staple creatures, right? So I'm thinking about Birds of Paradise, which, you know, all these little dorky dorks, they do help with food chain, right? Because food chain is better the more creatures you have to exile the food chain, right? So Deathrite Shaman is one of those necessary evils when it comes to mana dorks. I truly despise the card, but I will play it because it kind of feels like I have to at times. And then Delighted Halfling, you know, we talked about how important our commander itself is to our game plan, so really not excited about it eating a Red Blast or a Force of Will. You know, once again, not the play patterns I'm super jazzed about, but I can give you. This is not an ad nause deck as far as my current interpretation of this list goes. I don't think we need to like go deep into those lines, especially because Sultai does not nause nearly as well as other colors. I do like the idea of, with that in mind, playing Dismember as a removal piece. I think Dismember is super powerful, super flexible. I also should probably put in Fierce Guardianship because I do think this is a deck where we are going to try to cast our commander a reasonable amount. I think also I want to add a little bit more speed to the deck, right? So I'm looking at Elvish Mystic, or not, sorry, not Elvish Mystic, Elvish Spirit Guide. I'm talking about going considerably much faster. I like Wild Growth a lot in these colors too. I think Wild Growth is just a solid acceleration option, and in Orcish Bowmaster's Heavy Meta, another card we will be adding, it's just a little bit better at being resilient against that card. Also, as I'm going through this process, y'all, if you have some cards that you think should be included in this list and you're going through and you don't think I'm going to be adding it to this deck, please feel free to leave those thoughts down in the comments below in this video. I love hearing feedback from the community, and especially during the brewing process. I mean, the brewing is like some of my favorite things to be doing in cEDH ever. So I'm always happy to be engaging in the brewing process, and it's super cool when y'all jump in. So super happy to hear feedback on that as well. I feel like I want some clones at this point, right? So the two that have been doing the best for me in the format so far are definitely Flesh Duplicate, especially in these colors. And then the question is, like, do you want to do like a Phantasmal image, or do you want to do more of a, do you want to do something like a Phyrexian Metamorph? I think Phyrexian Metamorph is better in general. It's just a better clone, and in fact that it can copy your opponent's One Rings, another card which I need to reprioritize as far as adding to the deck. Definitely needs to get done. So let's look a little bit back towards the artifacts. So we just added the Elvish Spirit Guide, right, for a little bit of extra oomph in the speed department. I definitely think because our commander is 3 colors, we do want to be adding an Arcane Signet, right? Start using some of that colorless mana to become colored mana. I think a Felwar Stone fills in that very similar role as well. One thing we haven't talked about is Wishclaw Talisman. I think that card is a slam dunk in a deck like this. It's a tutor that we can then sacrifice later. We talked about the One Ring and how amazing that card is. I think in this version 1, I'm going to put Talion in here as just another card draw engine, because we're talking about card draw engines with the One Ring. Later on, if we find that we don't really need Talion that much and that the deck's like a little bit too fast for Talion, we can definitely cut it. But in the meantime, I kind of like having it here for this deck. A part of me also, you know, not necessarily because of Talion, but just because of the way the rad counters work, right? It's super easy to play them and like start milling and doing damage to your opponent. So I kind of think Bloodchief Ascension is not the worst card in here, right? And if we're milling our opponents, we kind of want to punish them for that happening, right? One of the things I also want to think about is this is a bit of a weird deck in the fact that like, wait. Okay, so you put the creature there, so you're not making a copy of it. So Grafdigger's Cage is very bad for us. So we don't want to do that. But one thing I do like is Mnemonic Betrayal, right? Because Mnemonic Betrayal allows us to use the fact that we're milling our opponents and then boop, oh hey, we're gonna, you know, take the graveyard of the person whose stuff we keep taking, and I'm just gonna cast all your things. I'm gonna cast them all and use a bunch of them, and boom, I'm winning the game now with all of your spells. And Bloodchief was kind of the same thought process, which is kind of how I got to where we are right now. The other question is like, is it better to mill our opponents passively and snipe a bunch of their creatures? Or should I be milling my opponents and hoping they dump a bunch of things into exile for like a Dauthi Voidwalker, right? I'm a little bit conflicted. I do love the idea of not feeding our opponents breach plans. I'm not gonna lie, that the idea of not losing to Underworld Breach does make me a little happy. So part of me wonders if that should just be a card that sticks in the deck in general, even if it does have a little bit of anti-synergy here and there. Back to the artifacts, we're at 11 already, which is not bad, but I know we can definitely do better. So we've got these guys. I don't think we play Mox Amber. This does not feel like a Mox Amber deck. I don't know whether to commit to like going up to a Mox Opal plan, because it's not a great artifact deck, right? We don't have super, you know, like we'd have to add a lot of talismans to get where I want to get with the artifacts. So I'm wondering if it's just not worth it to like go deep on adding more artifacts to the deck. That's tough, it really is. So we could do the blue farm thing where we get a bunch of talismans in there and then, you know, get a Mox Opal and stuff like that. But like, once again, we're not like an Ad Naz deck. We're not like really jamming these wins in the same way where we want a bunch of bad artifacts in the list. So to me, maybe the artifact count stays as is, you know, have 11, be fine with 11. It's not super crazy in either direction, and it, you know, works for our deck for the way it is right now. So I'm kind of into that. One thing I definitely want to include in this deck, because this card's broken in general, is Opposition Agent. Card's just strong. I also want to, I'm going to go and look at my Kazura and Ukima deck the one that I had mentioned I have a primer on, and we're gonna take that and see if there's any cards from that list that, you know, might stick out to us as some new additions to this deck. So this is my modern updated version of this deck. Let's see if it has anything that I think, okay, we have some unique cards to this list, and let's see if there's anything Kazurina. Oh my goodness, we don't even have a Dark Ritual in our deck. That's a big oversight. We're literally a Necropotence deck and there's no Dark Ritual. That's crazy. All right, so that's one we're fixing right away. Another one I just remembered is, and I don't think it's in the old version of this deck either, but we need a Culling Ritual for sure. It's one of the best cards in green and black. And I think it's very, very powerful here. I mean, just the idea of like, okay, cool, nuke the entire board. Now I'm going to play a black tutor, go grab food chain, win the game, right? Like very, very simple to be able to set up a lot of the lines like that. Or even, you know, on a base level, Culling Ritual, cast Tainted Pact, hope we get to our food chain mana, right? Like very, very clean, very, very easy. Abrupt Decay, I'm also now remembering as a piece in this deck in general. I'm not sure if this ends up being a Cyclonic Rift deck. I tend to play it in most of my blue decks, period, right now. I don't know if it's perfect for this deck specifically, but it's gonna be in there. I also did mention how Grafdigger's Cage is a bit of a pain in the butt for this deck, and I'm wondering if maybe we add another main deck piece, but we're gonna have Boseiju in the land spot, so like there's already a good amount of stuff in here that deals with it, being like Culling Ritual, Abrupt Decay, Cyclonic Rift, and Boseiju in the main deck. Once again, we haven't had Boseiju yet because we haven't worked on the mana base, but it's going to be in there. Go back to the comparison page. Let's see if there's anything else. Sylvan Library is probably a card we want to add. You know, people have their opinions on Sylvan Library, but this is not an ad nauseam deck. The only thing in our deck that cares about life totals is that Necropotence. So for me, I am not too upset if we play a Sylvan Library. Comparing to one of my older versions of this deck, I do think we maybe want a Laboratory Maniac in the deck, just because a lot of this deck relies around having Thassa's Oracle, and if we lose Thassa's Oracle, things get a lot clunkier. So Laboratory Maniac for sure goes in the deck, which probably means that Combat Courier goes in the deck to explain the relation of those two. Combat Couriers has the Unearth for 1 blue, and then you can pay 2 to sack Combat Courier and draw a card. So if you mill of your entire library, you bring it back with the Master, the Laboratory Maniac specifically, you still need a way to draw a card from your graveyard, and then you can unearth your Combat Courier and sacrifice it for the 2 mana. So you're able to then draw that card from Labman and have that back. So I do like the Combat Courier line for sure. Honestly, Blood Chief is so tempting. I think it's so funny in this deck. And also you get to the point where like if you're milling over your opponents a bunch and it gets that grindy part of the game, you do sort of have this very funny scenario where you're just like, okay, yeah, mill a bunch into Blood Chief and see what happens. Maybe that will be a test card in a later version of this deck, but maybe it doesn't make the final cut for now. I will say Veil of Summer is not a card I love a ton, but it feels like very good in a very proactive deck like this one. I also realized we didn't put Pact of Negation in there, which, you know, once again, we talked about how proactive we are. It definitely feels pretty good. We also don't have any way to like really manually get things out of our graveyard, especially if we mill over our own pieces, especially ones that might be important or they get countered or something like that. So I'm almost tempted to play like a Yawgmoth's Will in this deck for that very reason of like, okay, let me pay 3 mana and get the important thing out of my graveyard. You know, you can also do like a Noxious Revival or something like that. As sort of a backup plan, which totally works for sure. But I think a Yawgmoth's Will might not be a bad idea. I also recognize that there is this sort of older way of thinking about these decks where, you know, if you're doing a lot of the self-mill Hermit Druid stuff, you kind of want a backup card, right? So Memory's Journey is a really interesting card with flashback that you flashback out of your graveyard to reshuffle some cards back into your library. It's over here in the instance. Target player shuffles up to 3 cards from your graveyard into library. So for example, if you go to activate your Master and try to get back your Thassa's Oracle, right? Sometimes it doesn't work. Your opponents like try to do something to it, right? They go to exile it or some weird card like that, right? So you can pay 1 green and flashback Memory's Journey and be like, okay, cool, I'm going to shuffle my Thassa's Oracle back into my library, right? And that way you have Thassa's Oracle in your library and you're able to play it again. Sometimes you can also like shuffle a Thassa's Oracle and a Pact and a draw 2, right? So that way you can like have both. And sometimes those combinations work in pretty interesting ways. But at the end of the day, you at least get to shuffle your Thassa's back in and make that part work. Also brain freeze tech for some of those crazy lines that come out there. So, there's some cute stuff with Memory's Journey. I think it's probably just worth including as well. And you can always shuffle your Yawgmoth's Will back in too, which is kind of cool to be able to just, casually recast every other card in your deck. Right now we're at 95 cards, so honestly, we're chugging along at a pretty good rate. One of the things I'm seeing right now with the deck is we do have some important creatures and 0 tutors for them outside of Worldly Tutor, so I'm kind of down to play like a Finale or an Invasion of Ikoria. The benefit of each of them is Finale of Devastation can grab our Hermit Druid, because I believe the errata text is a human druid, unless I'm gravely mistaken. Yeah, it's human druid, so cannot be grabbed off of Invasion of Ikoria, which is important to note. It's also like, a 4-mana reanimation piece, which is not bad. And for some reason, if we make infinite mana but can't win with our commander, it's also just a win con. I don't hate anyways, right? So that part's not bad at all. And you know what? I'm feeling spicy this go around. So let's make this happen. I'm putting in Transmute Artifact and Bolas's Citadel. Is it going to be the best Bolas's Citadel deck in the entire world? No, we got 29 lands. I don't think it's going to be the best one. But on the other hand, this is cool and I want to do it. So we're gonna do it. It's genuinely as simple as that. I want to play Bolas's Citadel in this deck. I want to play my commander and then go, oh no, my commander's outlived its usefulness, sacrifice my commander. And one of the best parts about Citadel in a deck like this is, unlike an Ad Nauseam shell, right? When you hit something like a Hullbreaker Horror in Ad Nauseam, you're like, oh no, I have to take 7 life, darn, and I don't even get to cast this thing for free. Whereas with Citadel, you pay 7 life and you go, well, now there's a Hullbreaker Horror on the battlefield, and oh look, there's a 0 mana rock on top of my library. I'm gonna start winning the game now, right? So very, very easy for that to turn into a win. Necropotence already being in the deck also kind of works as like a 2-card combo with Citadel, because you basically pay 1 life to exile any cards you don't want, so you clear the way from Citadel. So you can't really get like land flooded as much. I said as much. You still can get land flooded, and still things will happen with that, but it will be harder for that reality to occur. So that we'll take those. We take those. Yeah, I'm almost tempted to just play another 2-mana rock too, because our commander has that like 1 green, black, blue cost, and just from cEDH experience in general, that shit comes up, like it is very relevant. We have blue and black being our 2 most represented colors, so that would be the ever so classic staple of Talisman of Dominance. The blue-black Talisman, that'll help us a little bit with fixing throughout this deck. All right, we need to add 1 more card to this deck. We can add another tutor. We can add, I don't think we really need to add any more interaction, to be honest. We're doing pretty solid on the interaction department. Big pains for the deck are like Curse Totem and Grafdigger's Cage, which I'm definitely keeping an eye on. And then decks that just win faster than us. So, that's another thing to keep in mind, is that maybe we need a few more. I definitely think we have a lot of the staples in Sultai sort of ironed out. Maybe I'll look at a different Sultai list to get a little more examples. Also, sometimes I go over here to the EDH Rex tab, because sometimes it'll just have some of the staples that I don't think about. Right now, I guarantee they do not have enough for this commander because it's brand new. That makes sense. Rude, but fair enough. So now I'm kind of looking at other Sultai decks in these, obviously in these colors, being Sultai, just to see if anyone's doing some stuff. I'm looking at currently Temujin's Thrasios Francisco list that did well at a couple Chaos tournaments recently, just to see if there's anything that's a little bit of crossover. Manglehorn's actually sticking out to me as just being super impactful in the current cEDH metagame, and honestly, I think that's exactly what I wanted to find, was a card like that. So yeah, I'm kind of all in on our good friend Manglehorn here as our last card to fill out our deck. So yay, research paying off right away with that. All right, and now we're doing really well, but we have 29 islands here, which does not work for Hermit Druid, Tainted Pact, or casting our spells. So once again, let's go down to that breakdown. We have 38% blue, so 27 of the cards in our deck are blue, 22 are black, and 16 are green, with 23% of all the symbols. 27 cards are, 38% of cards are blue. And then 35 symbols are blue in the deck, 29 symbols are black, and 17 are green. So we have a pretty heavy blue start, then black secondary, green decently behind the other three colors. So keeping that in mind as we go through this process. First thing to do is add all of the fetch lands, right? I could manually type them out or use one of these hotkeys here on Moxfield. Very easy to do. So for those who don't know, for every 2 color combination, you get 7 fetch lands. For every 1 color combination, you get 4 fetch lands, right? One of, every matching color of yours. For every 3 color combination, you get 9 fetch lands, except for the ones that don't match your colors, right? So blue, black, and green, the only colors they are not is red and white. The other colors have overlap. So you get 9 fetches in this deck. You also get to add the true dual lands, as they're called, our Underground Sea, Bayou, and Tropical Island. Let's add our Shocklands for good measure, and Watery Grave, Overgrown Tomb, Breeding Pool. All right, now let's add our staple lands that I always consider in every deck. That's Gemstone Caverns. I play in every cEDH deck. Ancient Tomb, which I play in the majority of cEDH decks. Exceptions do exist to that one. Exotic Orchard and Forbidden Orchard, I need very, very, very good reasons to not run, especially in decks with more than 3 colors. I also think the very obvious Command Tower deserves a place in here for sure. We have the 5-color staple of Mana Confluence, and we have City of Brass, which is basically the exact same card. And already we have 22 of our 29 lands. We talked about how we want Boseiju in our mana base. That's a very standout card. Seiju Who Endures to be that artifact enchantment or non-basic land removal. We want Odawara because Odawara is a very powerful bounce spell, also on a land, so all about that one as well. I don't think we need Takanuma as the black version of this effect. It mills and recurs stuff, which is cool because that's kind of what our commander does, and then milling is like decent with our commander. I was sort of doubting it, and then I started selling it on to myself. There is a little bit of synergy with our commander. It only mills 3 cards, so it's like, is that really worth it? Is the question. I'm not sure. So in the meantime, let's not go for that. What other things do we normally add as our land staples? I mean, we can add Tarnished Citadel, which is the land that can tap for 5 colors, but every time you tap for colored mana, it lightning bolts you. It's a little extreme, especially in a deck like this one, but it's also impactful and powerful and consistent. So, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B type situation. Let's see. You can do the Battle Bond lands at this point, so like Morphic Pool, especially is the best one. Because we have such a heavy blue-black slant in the deck. We can also add the blue-green one, once again, blue being our dominant color. So Rejuvenating Springs is a pretty solid card there. I also do like adding some of our cantrip lands, and this also does help if we are trying to win with Laboratory Maniac, right? So the cards there are Waterlogged Grove and Nurturing Peatland, and those basically help so that, if we need to exile our whole library and then also draw a card, right? Or if we've already milled our Library of Thaumaturge and still need to draw a card, boom, we can just crack one of our lands and do that. So that's actually pretty helpful, especially because we're playing Labman, classic cEDH staple of the past. And then, what the heck with it? Why don't we just add our Tarnished Citadel, make it a nice clean 29, and are able to sort of move on. And that's our first draft of this mutant deck, the Master Transcendent from the new Fallout expansion to Magic. I am so excited that Fallout is in Magic. For those who don't know, I'm a huge Fallout fanboy. I'm so excited this deck exists. Please let me know in the comments below if there's any cards you think I left out from this deck. I'm so curious to hear if y'all have any special ideas about the cards in this deck. It's so much fun to build this deck. I am literally so disappointed because this set isn't out yet, and I want nothing more than to play this deck specifically. But I gotta wait like everybody else does for the week afterwards, where maybe we can see if I can build this whole thing in a week. Might be tough, but honestly, effort worth it for a deck that looks so sick like this one does. So I'm super jazzed that this commander exists. I'm super geeked out about the idea that I can play this in a cEDH tournament. It's a cool design on a card. It's everything I like doing in Magic. It's like literally the only thing that could be better about this card is if it also allowed me to play Dockside. Then I would be in heaven, right? Like this card is so sick and I'm super excited about it. And I cannot wait to see how this ends up at the cEDH tables. Let me know in the comments below if y'all think this card has the legs to make it work in cEDH. I'm super excited about it and I hope you guys are too. Thank you all for watching this video. It is so greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for Tales of Adventure and for the Pocket Paragons Massive Verse fighting card game for sponsoring this video. Y'all are amazing and I cannot thank you enough. And more importantly, I cannot thank the patrons enough who help support this channel. You guys are the entire reason that this transition for, you know, coaching and things like that becoming my full-time job was possible. I want to thank everyone who's done coaching with me so far. For those who aren't familiar, I have a pretty solid resume as far as cEDH is concerned. I'm pretty sure they ran the numbers and the top 4 players of all time. I'm pretty sure I'm in that category. And also I have more wins than any other player on different decks of any cEDH player at this point. So, you know, if you're interested in coaching from a player like that, you can find me at comedianmtg@gmail.com. You can find me at Twitter at comedianmtg and comedian_mtg on Discord. All of those are in the description below. And the description will also contain our link to our Massive Verse Kickstarter, which is so freaking cool. I can't wait for so many of y'all to pick up Pocket Paragons because I know you guys are going to love this game because I love it so deeply much. Thank you all so much for supporting. If you're interested in coaching, you can reach out to me at those places. If you're interested in helping out the channel on Patreon, you can do all that. Liking and subscribing is free, takes so little effort. Please, it helps out the channel a ton. And so excited to hear what y'all think about the Master Transcendent. It's making me super happy and I cannot wait to hear what people are doing with this commander and I cannot wait to play it myself. Super cool stuff. Thank you all for watching and I will catch you next time.